Okay. Let's do this. Alright, let's do this. I've got 3 hours until I have to go to work and work the night shift. So, let us read a chapter of a suburban fantasy before doing it, because after all, this month's chapter on patreon.com/99geek, as well as 99geek.ca, is going to be urban fantasy, the season 2 of this book series. So, it's only going to benefit me to read this stuff. Give me just a sec. I'm back. I certainly didn't smoke pot. That would be crazy. Alright, Chapter 11, previously on A Suburban Fantasy. Lin SMith was a teenage girl who got turned into a vampire against her will by an evil serial-killing monster named Eckhart Gaines. She managed to escape from the monster and got back to her friends, who helped her acclimate herself to the world and reassociate herself with her school and her geeky life, and hide her new curse from her parents. She's been going back to school. It was a weekend, and she went with her friend Jason to his new job, where crazy shit happened. They blew up a building that didn't want to blow up. It turned out it was connected to a portal to a crack in reality, in space-time, and they met a modern mage who was also the mayor of Mississauga, and she helped solve the problem and gave Lin SMith some valuable advice on the side. Meanwhile, her friends Ian and Tanya went on an investigating adventure to try and learn more about the person who turned her into a vampire, and they learned some pretty key information and found that someone who was linked to one of the victims of Eckhart Gaines was in fact a teacher at the school. They went and investigated him and found out he was somewhat of a vampire hunter. So that's interesting. And now, meanwhile, her mother got a job with the mayor of Oakville, not to be confused with the mayor of Mississauga, who was a modern mage, but the mayor of Oakville is someone else who we're going to learn about very soon, I promise. So, thus begins Chapter 11 of A Suburban Fantasy. Do you believe in time travel? Is what it's called. It was raining diamonds. That was to say, it was a hard rain, slicing at Rachel's skin like those annoying little tacks falling point end first from the clouds. It was the kind of rain that flooded the gutters and sent everyone scurrying for the dry shelter of their houses, or the wet shelter at the bottom of their pints of beer. Rachel wished she could say she was one of the people warm and safe, but, quite alternatively, she was stalking 3 teenage girls on the roof of an 8-story building overlooking the lights and bustle of a city drowning in a storm. Not one of them noticed her, but then again, why would they? She was a silent shadow, a black figure against the dark of the night. Rain continued to hammer against the hood of her black sweater, dripping off the blade of her sword held firmly in her right hand, more than firmly. She couldn't have it slipping from her hand in combat. That would be embarrassing. Lightning flashed, revealing her place above them on a large air vent. They turned to face her, but it was too late for all 3 of them. She was already in motion, launching herself from the vantage point she had on them and cutting the middle girl clean in half from head to toe. With an equally fluid motion she stabbed out, spearing the second girl straight through the heart. There was no blood, but, just like that, both girls were gone. The great thing about training in a dream was that things like physics and biology didn't need to work like they did in the real world. It meant she could really let loose without worrying about hurting anyone. The third girl was ready for Rachel as the teen vampire pulled her sword free of her second victim. The last combatant had a fairly large axe, large enough, that is, that the girl didn't seem quite capable of wielding it. Grasping the weapon unsteadily with both hands, she could only barely get the blade high enough to deflect Rachel's slash for her neck. Rachel had wanted to end the fight quickly. She didn't know what city she was in, but her clothes were now so wet from the rain she felt they were weighing her down, making her movements sluggish. Also, she didn't have much time before she had to wake up for school Monday morning. Rachel gave a few more easily blocked slashes, probing the girl's defenses. The girl was pale, with light freckles on her quivering cheeks, trembling from the cold. She held her axe in place, deflecting Rachel's advances. Finally growing impatient, the girl tried to force an attack of her own, swinging her axe down with all her might. It would have cleaved Rachel right through her forehead had she not been able to bring her sword up in time. Holding the blade of her weapon in her offhand, she tried to absorb the brunt of the girl's attack, but the axe was too heavy. Rachel fell backward, smacking her spine against the flat edge of the roof. The axe threatened to crush her against the brick of the ledge, and traffic horns bleeped threats up at her from below. The freckled girl pulled her axe back and dropped it on top of Rachel again, but this time Rachel angled herself to the left so that the axe would miss her by a hair. Grabbing the pale girl's arm, Rachel used the girl's momentum, only needing to add very little of her own, to send the girl toppling over the edge to the street below. "Prepare to be terminated," said a girl's voice, trying very poorly to pull off an Arnold Schwarzenegger accent. Rachel slowly pulled herself up and grabbed her sword. Rachel slowly pulled herself up, grabbing her sword, and holding it up defensively as lightning flashed and Rachel caught a glimpse of this new girl's face. "Really?" Rachel asked Lily. Arnold references are so cliché. "The movie had only just come out when I died," Lily pointed out in her defense. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed cheerleader was carrying a sword as well, and swung it playfully through the air as she stepped from the shadows to join Rachel at the ledge. It could have easily taken just one strong gust of wind to send them both falling to their deaths like the girl and her axe. Lily spun her sword in her hand, twirling it around like the Jedi, and their lightsabers in Star Wars. Rachel knew better. One of her first lessons with Genevieve had been learning that all the dramatic swinging and showy stuff on TV would only get her killed. It was better to barely move her sword at all and make every movement count, conserve her energy. It was with that in mind that Rachel held her sword in her favorite position, the defensive reverse grip, and waited patiently for Lily to advance. It was hard to attack with Rachel's sword held backwards, but it was great for deflecting light attacks and getting her opponent in close. Though this was only Rachel's second night in training, time passed more slowly in her dreams. She felt like she'd been training for a week with Genevieve, learning techniques and styles and how to react to different scenarios. It was like she was living an old girl's Broadway production of The Matrix. Also, why wasn't that a thing? Lily was close now, and brought her sword down on Rachel, but the teen vampire was ready. She deflected Lily's first swing, allowing the girl's blade to slide harmlessly off her own. The second slash was horizontal, right at her belly. Again, Rachel easily deflected it aside. "I'm better with a sword than you," Rachel told Lily, grabbing the girl's calf with her free hand and yanking her legs out from under her. "You can't win." It was true. The other girls in Rachel's head had wanted to help with her training by offering her other targets to fight. None of them knew how to fight quite like Genevieve, however, so they all equated to little more than cannon fodder. Lily fell backwards, landing on the palm of her hand and gracefully cartwheeling backwards onto her feet. Rachel had seen the whole thing and was still unsure how the blonde girl hadn't fallen off the roof. "You've been training with a sword for like 200 hours, Lily said, "but I was a cheerleader for 5 years. Lily moved in again, and Rachel abandoned her reverse grip for a much more standard sort of fighting style. Bringing the sword over her head, she flashed down with it to block every attack. Sword fighting took a lot more focus than most people in the modern day were capable of. Society had trained everyone to multitask, to split their focus. Focus had been Rachel's greatest learning curve, as she'd struggled for much of the first night trying to clear her mind, and fight without any context. It was the context that slowed her down, conscious thought that kept her from making her parries. Her mind had to be so focused on her sword that her moves became subconscious, pure instinct. Nothing less would do. but Lily was too easy an opponent. Rachel hooked her blade easily behind Lily's and squeezed until Lily had no choice but to release her sword or lose her whole hand. Releasing her pressure on Lily's hand, Rachel spun around the blonde and kicked her playfully in the butt so that she stumbled forward to the very corner of the roof. Sighing in relief, Lily turned and shrugged. "You beat me." Rachel relaxed. "You think I could beat Eckhart?" she asked Lily. "You've fought him before." Lily shook her head, stepping away from the edge. "I ran," she explained to Rachel. "Not quite the same thing." "Not very comforting," Rachel admitted. "Sorry," Lily said. "If you're coming to me for hope, I'm all kinds of the wrong person. I don't think you can be stopped. Sarah Connor had better luck against the Terminator." "Oh, come on," Rachel told Lily. "There have been so many better movies since then." "I don't believe you," Lily said stubbornly, folding her arms. "Have you seen it?" "Well, I don't believe you about Eckhart being unbeatable," Rachel retorted. "Good," Lily said. "Frankly, it's that kind of attitude you're going to need if you want any chance in hell." Suddenly, and without any polite warning, Lily swung a fast fist at Rachel's face. Rachel blocked the punch with her left hand easily. "What are you—" Rachel started to say, but Lily kicked out angrily with her gymnast legs, and Rachel lost balance. Falling over the side, Rachel stabbed her sword into the wall of the building and managed to secure herself. Lily peered down on Rachel, hanging from her sword 8 stories above a bustling city street, and the blonde girl smiled. "The part at the end, with the exoskeleton chasing Sarah Connor, was one of the best scenes in cinema history." "Really?" Rachel asked in frustration, trying not to lose her grip in the slippery rain. "You're still on about that? I can name one movie just right off the top of my head that was better." "Yeah?" Lily asked. "Do it then." "Terminator 2." "You know what?" Lily asked Rachel. "Screw you!" She spit at Rachel in mock anger. "Did that hit you?" I don't think so," Rachel admitted. "It's kind of raining heavy. I don't know." "Look," Lily said, leaning out as far as she could so Rachel could see her. "If you want to wake up for school this morning, you're going to have to chase me." "What?" Rachel asked, not at all liking the direction of their conversation. She could see Lily about to repeat herself, but then stopped. "You heard me," she muttered, stepping back and out of Rachel's sight. Lily reappeared just long enough to be seen running across the roof and jumping over an alley onto the fire escape of the taller building beside them. Rachel pulled herself up as carefully as she could, taking time not to slip on the wet and slippery surface. The water was gushing out from the gutter and splashing all over her face as if her climb wasn't near impossible enough. By the time she was on her feet again, Lily had already disappeared into the other building, but Rachel wasn't about to let her get away. Giving chase, Rachel jumped the alley and landed on the fire escape just below where Lily had landed. Climbing the ladder, Rachel found the window was open and followed far behind Lily into the hallway of a lavish apartment building. The walls were a disgusting brown and green collage, and Rachel was dripping water on the already wet blue carpet. The teen vampire wasn't the only one in the hallway. "Found you," Rachel said, spotting Lily at the other end of the hall. The blonde teen wasn't hiding. In fact, she'd found a new sword and 2 new friends, both with swords of their own. "This is my town, Rachel," Lily boasted with a glint in her eye. "But you're in my head," Rachel said, jumping onto the wall to dodge a heavy stroke from the first girl to reach her. Grabbing the light hanging from the ceiling, Rachel swung from the wall, slashing the girl's head clean off. Her head and body disappeared before ever hitting the ground. The second girl wasn't nearly as ready to come in, her deep black eyes wide in surprise. Using the girl's hesitation, Rachel lunged from the wall and kicked the girl in the face. The girl crashed backward into a wall, and before she could recover, Rachel had landed on her feet and stabbed her sword through the girl's chest. Pulling her weapon from the wall, Rachel turned on Lily to see that she'd found herself a second sword. "Right," Rachel told Lily sarcastically. "That's why you couldn't beat me. You didn't have enough swords." Lily started to flail her swords around dangerously and carefree, looking a little silly, but keeping Rachel from getting it within striking distance. "This is you," Lily said. "This is what you look like, you Asian teen ninja vampire gotha person." She started towards Rachel, forcing the teen vampire to step back. "I don't think 2 swords is gonna cut it," Rachel told Lily, insulted enough to do something crazy. Diving under Lily's sword, Rachel slid past the blonde cheerleader, and reached up to slash one of the girl's wrists as she passed. Lily dropped one of her swords in pain and clutched her hand to her shirt instinctively in an attempt to stem the flow of blood that never came. "And I'm not goth," Rachel said calmly, getting back to her feet. "You're right," Lily said. "I don't have enough swords." She threw her remaining sword at Rachel, who easily dodged it. The blade went through a window on the other side of the hall, the glass shattering into the carpet. "Who's going to be paying for that?" Rachel asked rhetorically, since they were in a dream. "You will," Lily said, passing Rachel in a mad dash for the window. "Lest you catch me first," she added before disappearing. "I don't have time for this," Rachel called out, running to the window in time to see Lily drop gracefully down 4 stories onto the roof of a parking garage. She landed beside an SUV, rolling on impact. Rachel pulled away from the window. "This'll be easy," Rachel insisted to herself, taking a running start and jumping out the window. She flailed her arms wildly in the air as the concrete rushed towards her, but it was no use. She hit the roof of the SUV so hard that the vehicle just crumpled beneath her. And even though it was a dream, boy did that fall hurt. Rachel had to climb her way out of the SUV, rolling over the side and flopping clumsily to the floor. She could see Lily jumping off the roof into the street below, and was silently grateful the ex-cheerleader hadn't seen Rachel's less than flattering drop. Her side hurt from where she'd impacted against the vehicle, but she tried to ignore the screaming pain as she struggled valiantly to her feet. She wasn't going to be bested so easily. After all, Eckhart had been able to keep up with the girl long enough to kill her. Surely Rachel could stay on her tail for at least a night. Rachel stumbled to the railing and watched as Lily weaved her way through traffic across the street to a bustling and pounding nightclub. Rachel wanted to follow, but didn't quite feel like trying another 4-story fall. Instead, she spotted the closest tree, a tall, thin-leaf thing that was more branch than leaf, and made a running leap into the brush, grabbing onto the thickest branch she could. Climbing down halfway, she dropped the rest of the distance, but made sure to sew herself on as many branches as she could. It didn't look pretty, but she landed lightly on her feet. Crossing the street turned out to be harder, and by the time Rachel got across, Lily had already disappeared inside the nightclub. The music was blaring, but Rachel consciously ignored it as she stepped into the strobe lights of the club. The only music she hated more than rap music was 80s rap music. The club was packed with people, some on the dance floor, or socializing at tables, or ordering drinks from the bar. Lily was easy to spot. She was on the dance floor, though she didn't look much like she wanted to dance. In fact, she'd been given space to stand and seemed to be waiting patiently for Rachel. The music lowered, thankfully, as Rachel took a dripping wet step onto the dance floor. People surrounding Lily all moved aside automatically, but casually, as if not consciously aware of either girl. "Does it ever bother you that you're dead?" Rachel asked, no longer particularly interested in fighting now that she'd managed to catch Lily. She couldn't stop replaying over and over in her head what that all-knowing entity had told her. "I don't really think about it," Lily said with an edge in her voice that implied that Rachel might have come off as offensive. "But the whatever told me you aren't even a ghost of Lily," Rachel pushed. "Just a copy of her living in my head. What happens when you're right and Eckhart kills me? Then it'll be like none of you ever even existed at all." She'd been thinking a lot about death, particularly the thought that there might not be anything after it. "Gives me a pretty damn good reason to help you beat him then, doesn't it?" Lily asked rhetorically. "I mean, what do you want me to tell you, that I envy the living?" Rachel wasn't quite sure what she wanted from Lily. They had grown to become friends, but the closer they got, the more uncomfortable Rachel got. "Where do you go when I'm awake?" she asked. "Most of us go home," Lily said quietly. "No, not you, Xbox. Don't you go home. Xbox, go to TV. Xbox, go to TV. Thank you. Alright. Where was I? That was so unexpected. Lily said quietly. "Most of us go you know where," Lily said quietly. "At least the closest thing we can remember to it. Some of us have started banding together." "Doesn't it bother you that you'll never get to see Terminator 2 or 3 or 4? Lily made a grimace, and Rachel cursed herself for rubbing it in. "Yeah," Lily said. "You think we all don't suffer from living envy?" "Then why haven't you wanted to talk about it before?" Rachel asked. Because we can't afford to be that selfish, Lily replied at last. I'm already dead. My world has already shattered. Ancient history, even. I just thought it would be nice if I could help you save yours, and then maybe mine wouldn't have been so pointless, you know? I wanted one of us to make it out with some remaining semblance of a life. Everyone in the bar was listening in on their conversation now, but Lily didn't seem even a little embarrassed for her outburst. In fact, she opened her arms wide. Eckhart ruined all of our lives, she said, and he'll ruin hundreds more unless you can stop him. There was something about what Lily said that made Rachel's heart figuratively stop. She hadn't realized it, but every person in the nightclub was female, and they were all faces she recognized from previous sparring matches. Rachel had followed Lily like a blind sheep being led to the slaughter. She'd walked boldly into a trap, and now found herself surrounded by more estrogen than an episode of Ellen DeGeneres. They were all watching her, and advancing slowly, calmly, as if waiting for something, but wound tight like a catapult ready to fire. Genevieve was the only woman who hadn't joined the rest on the dance floor. She instead approached the DJ booth and tapped on the microphone. The noise was heard loudly through every speaker in the room, and the 18th century woman couldn't help but chuckle. Amazing, she said with a smile, her French accent accentuating the Z. Rachel made sure to keep her eyes on the girls around her, ignoring Genevieve best she could, but the woman just kept talking. There is a very big difference between a duel and an actual fight. Real fighting is disgusting. They reek of backstabbing and all sorts of foul play. You must be ready to adapt yourself for anything. Any possible. I'm such a terrible writer. Keep in mind I wrote this right out of school. I write better now. Somewhat. Ish. I improve. Every day. Like 100 pissed off babes, Rachel muttered. The women around her were getting close now. She swung her blade wildly, turning in circles to keep everyone back, knowing she was only doing exactly what Lily had done in their last fight. But what more could she do than keep them at bay? Any one of these girls would be no match for you, Genevieve continued with her lesson, and yet together they are a very real threat. Zero of your normal bag of tricks will work against a group so grand. Don't let yourself be blinded by confidence, because even the very weak can be dangerous to you, and even the very strong have weaknesses. You need to learn to go up against even impossible odds and identify how to bring them to your level. One of the bigger girls in the group lunged forward and let Rachel's blade dig deep into her side. I've got your sword, the larger girl said with a grunt. She grabbed the sword still stuck in her gut and tried to fall backward into the crowd, but Rachel wouldn't let go. They were all on her now. A punch hit her square in the face and she was seeing stars. Then it happened again. Reluctantly, Rachel let go of her sword and brought her hands up to defend her face. She blocked one punch, then another, but there were fists everywhere. Then a knee hit her ribcage, and a foot dug into her stomach, keeling her over. She tried to crawl under a table, but one girl got in her way and stomped maliciously on her right hand, grinding the bones in her finger. Then a boot connected to Rachel's face, and she flopped over, rolling the rest of the way to the table. It was square, with one long base in the center keeping it up. Gathering her strength together, she lifted the table and swung it like a weapon. Her skin felt like tenderized meat pretty much all over. She'd never been in that much pain before, but she didn't blame Genevieve for putting her through the ringer. She needed to be ready for the worst if she was to survive another run-in with Eckhart, and besides, it was all in her head. She used the table as a shield, battering people back with it and making room for herself. Someone got in behind her, and, though her right hand wasn't working quite right anymore, Rachel made the best fist she could muster before swinging out and clubbing the girl away. The table was slowing her down. It was leaving her open to attack on more sides than it was protecting her, and the last thing she needed was to get overwhelmed again. Rachel threw the table at a clump of girls to her left, knocking them all back like pins in a bowling alley. She had room now, but knew it would be only seconds before they all closed the distance on her. She had to make a move now. She pounced forward onto a redhead, bringing the pale girl to the ground in front of 5 others. She needed to keep them spread out, bunched in smaller groups instead of all together as one mob. That gave her about 5 seconds to deal with this group before the rest had a chance to close in around her. She jumped into the air, kicking out at the girl to her left, smashing the girl's nose in. The next girl had a flowing white dress that, while looking stunning, made it very easy to take her out. The girl swung wildly, but Rachel weaved inside her reach, grabbed her dress, and pulled her into a devastating uppercut. Rachel knew someone was coming in behind her. She had immediately noticed the large shadow. This girl was big. Rachel tried to surprise the girl with an elbow, but the girl caught it and held tight. Rule 1 of kicking butt was not to get trapped, and yet the large girl really had her now. "Last time you got me in the lung," the large woman said, wrapping a strong arm around Rachel's neck. "I had to slowly suffocate to death. How does it feel?" "Urgh." "You don't have to volunteer, you know," Rachel tried to say, but she was having a hard time getting the syllables out with a crushed windpipe. "Oh, I'm not complaining," she said, leaning close to whisper in Rachel's ear, "just savoring the sweet taste of revenge." She looked around the dance floor. "Someone stab this Chinese wench and get it over with," she called. "I'm Japanese," Rachel struggled to say. "Half Japanese." She was desperately pulling on the woman's arm with both her hands, but it seemed her attempts were futile. Worse still, the others had surrounded them again, and were looking to take full advantage of Rachel's troubles. One girl, quite possibly the freckled one from earlier with the axe, came at her with a punch to the gut, but Rachel blocked the fist with her foot, kicking out at the girl to push her back. The large woman grasped Rachel's neck with one beefy hand and slammed her face with tremendous strength into the bar. The first thing Rachel noticed was the crack of her nose, and then there was black for an indeterminate amount of time, and when Rachel came to, she was hanging limp from the larger girl's grasp and under scrutiny. "You look full-blown to me," the young woman said with a rough laugh. She tossed Rachel over the bar as if the teen vampire was a rag doll. Rachel smashed into the shelves of whiskey bottles, causing a right old mess. Rolling off the counter, she fell hard to the floor and took a quick breath. She was really starting to wish she would just wake up already. Instead, she defiantly pulled herself onto shaky legs and stared the larger woman down. Rachel needed a distraction, something to divert the attention of at least half the girls. She needed to cause a little chaos, fast. But how? Her foot shifted beneath her and crunched on a piece of glass. The floor was a mess, with puddles of alcohol everywhere and more dripping down from the shelves. Rachel was also just short enough to spot the matchbook hidden under the bar. Grabbing a couple large whiskey bottles, Rachel shattered them against the bar top, covering it in the sticky drink. "Stop wasting all that booze," the large woman started to say, but stopped quite suddenly as a bottle shattered against her jaw. Vodka dripped down her face and soaked into her shirt. "I don't know your name," Rachel said, throwing a couple more bottles at the 6'4" tower of pure muscle, "but I am so sorry about the whole lung thing." Grabbing and igniting a match, she dropped it atop the bar. The entire surface ignited, and the fire spread, like only fire could, to the floor and across to the back counter. The large woman stumbled back, and for her fast reaction she got to survive, but that was okay. Rachel had more matches. Scene change, scene change, scene change. Tanya woke up that morning with a plan. She was going to ask Rachel out, like on a real date. Sure, she'd had the same plan before with other girls, but she could never strike up the courage to actually ask. She was no longer satisfied with long kisses in bathrooms or secret snuggles at slumber parties. She wanted to hold a girl's hand down the hall. She wanted people to know they were a couple. She didn't know why she cared. It really didn't matter what people thought about her, and yet, deep inside, she knew that wasn't true. Or else why would she find it so hard to ask out a girl she had a crush on? Rachel was different. She wasn't like any girl Tanya had ever met before. She knew she felt something special in their kiss, and she knew Rachel felt it too. This time she would really do it, come out of the stupid closet. She hated that metaphor. Her alarm had been set to wake her up long before sunrise, and yet Tanya was surprised to find her dad's lab jacket was already missing from the coat rack as she descended the stairs that morning. What was so immediate in her dad's life that it couldn't even wait until the end of breakfast television? After a sharp cold shower, Tanya chose to dress up that Monday with a Catholic schoolgirl theme. Only under a plaid skirt she wore a baggy pair of jeans. Her white dress shirt was buttoned, but the sleeves were rolled back and a colored bow tie hung loose around her neck. To finish the effect, her hand traveled straight past her contacts to her glasses. Sipping them on, she grabbed an apple from the kitchen and her knapsack from the front hall. Stepping out into the chilly morning, she threw her knapsack into the back of her van before pulling away from their extravagant driveway. She wanted to catch Rachel at home before school, so that they could talk in private, but her intentions were moot. Ian was already making his way up the walk when she pulled to the curb. "What in blazes are you doing here?" Ian asked as she got out. Let's pretend I asked you Let's pretend I asked you that question," she told Ian, "only less gay." This was written a decade ago. Also, that's Tanya using gay as a derogatory statement, not me, for the record. Let's just be clear. Alright. And she is technically gay, so I don't know what that means. Oh, and then, anyway, let's pretend I asked you that question, she told Ian, only less gay. She'd been trying really hard not to use gay as an insult, but maybe not hard enough. Who says blazes anyway, dweebs? "I'm here every morning," Ian said in response to Tanya's question. "Well, I'll give you $60 if you leave now and meet us at school," Tanya told Ian. Ian laughed. "Not happening," he told her. "I'm finally going to do it, and you can bear witness if you want." "What are you going to do?" Tanya asked, annoyed that Ian couldn't be bought. She'd almost forgot all about Ian's relationship with Rachel. Was there anything there? "I'm going to ask her out," he told her. "Like on a real date." Crap. She didn't say that. "No shit," she muttered bitterly. It suddenly occurred to her why she was in such a rush to come out of the closet. She was jealous of Ian. "We're practically already going out," he told her. "We slept together on Saturday after I told her everything." "You told her everything?" Tanya repeated bluntly. "And then you had sex with her?" Why hadn't she thought of that first? She'd never considered herself the jealous type, but she had to fight back an urge to strike Ian across the face with her fist. "What?" Ian said with a jump. "No, we just slept," he corrected her quickly. "I said slept together, maybe spooned a little." "Right," Tanya said with a roll of her eyes as her heart started beating again. "I forgot how lame you are." "Just because I'm not a slut doesn't make me lame," Ian said darkly. As soon as the words were out of his mouth, it was clear he regretted them. Tanya felt her nostrils flare. "You just gave me permission to punch you on your ass," she told him, prodding his chest with her finger. "Then do it," Ian said, going pale. He spread his arms wide to give her a clear shot, but she didn't take it. "Not now," she told him. "Oh no," he said, lowering his arms. "I want it over with." "Give me 24 hours. She suggested, not wanting to prolong the torture at least a little bit. It's funny because she does pay off that punch at the very end of the book, which is in 24 hours. So the whole rest of the book, which is still like 100 pages at least, is only going to be 24 hours. Just so that you know, that was kind of a foreshadowy moment. Which is kind of crazy to think about. I'm like, is that right? Yeah, no, that's right. It's crazy because we got 3 more chapters, but no, it's true. 24 hours. The rest of the book. Alright. Crazy. Alright. Give me 24 hours, she suggested. That's so foreboding, too. It's like, why are we talking about this bullshit then? We got 24 hours before this fucking thing ends. Yeah, no, a lot's gonna happen in this 24 hours. A lot. A lot. Alright, give me 24 hours, she suggested, not wanting to prolong the torture at least a little bit. Fine, Ian told her. You got the day, but tomorrow we're even, punch or no punch. Deal, Tanya said, passing Ian to knock on the door. Hey, I want to knock, Ian said, rushing to beat Tanya to the door. Tanya grabbed him and tried to pull him back. Oh, now you'll run, she muttered as she struggled with him. I was walking fast, he argued. Let go. Tanya held his arm tightly. It doesn't matter who knocks, she told him through gritted teeth. Then stop fighting me, he insisted.
The front door of Rachel's house opened on its own, and Tanya instinctively released Ian, who had been pulling so hard that he stumbled and fell onto the grass. "Oh, sorry," Rachel's mother said, poking her head outside. She was dressed in a handsome lady's suit and was still applying her lipstick as she closed the door behind her. "Excuse me, girls." She seemed in a hurry. "Girls?" Ian repeated with annoyance. "Hey, Ian," Mrs. Lin said, not even looking at him. "You know what I meant." She drained her coffee and handed the mug to Tanya. "If you're going in, can you hand this to my husband?" she asked. "Good morning, Mrs. Lin," Tanya said, tucking the mug under her arm to just shake the older woman's hand. "I heard you got a job with the mayor. Congratulations." "I'm trying to get to the office before him," Mrs. Lin said, checking her watch on the way to her car. "Good luck with that," Tanya said sarcastically, knowing her effort will be for nothing. "What was that?" Lin asked, trying to read Tanya's meaning behind her words and figure out who this new girl to their house was. Tanya frowned and muttered, "Never mind," not wanting to give away the secret she'd kept successfully for years. "I gotta run," Lin said, her high heels tapping obnoxiously against the pavement. "Have a good day at work," Ian called from the grass as he got to his feet. He joined Tanya on the front porch. "After you." What are you on about?" Tanya asked with mock offense. "What?" Ian said, confused. Etiquette clearly states ladies first," Tanya explained, poking fun at Ian. "That's funny," said Ian, not laughing at all. He did, however, open the door and lead the way inside. Rachel's house was nothing like Tanya's. One was a huge mansion, and the other was a small, cluttered townhouse. That was just one of many differences, but Tanya had to admit Rachel's house felt more like a real home. It felt lived in. The furniture wasn't dusted every day by their maid. The counters on the kitchen didn't sit sparkling and never used. Rachel's appliances weren't cardboard props. "Hey, Ian," Rachel's dad said as they stepped inside. He was in the kitchen, cooking something at the stove. "Don't worry, I've got breakfast on the way." Tanya couldn't be certain, but it looked a lot like Mr. Smith was trying to cook Eggos in a frying pan. "You're hot," said a little black haired boy. Yes, they've got a little black boy that they keep in the corner in a cage. It's very sad. No, that's horrible. You're hot," said a little black-haired boy from a stool at the counter. He was playing some Game Boy thing, but his attention was no longer on the screen. He was a cute kid, couldn't have been older than 12 or 13. A little creepy, though. Tanya just gave a coy smile and crossed her arms. "I know," she said. "And she's cool," the boy said under his breath. "You can't be friends with my sister." That got Mr. Smith to finally notice her. Putting down the spatula, he turned and offered his hand. "You're the school prime minister, right?" "President," Tanya corrected him with a smile as she shook his hand. "But what's a title among friends?" She wanted to make a good first impression, but how could she compete with Ian when Rachel's whole family already loved him? "Not very Canadian," Rachel's dad said with a huff. "Dad," Rachel's voice called out. "Stop embarrassing me," she said, coming down the stairs in a white hoodie and a toque with cute little vampire fangs. Tanya thought she looked adorable. Rachel's brother disagreed. You look like a really short evanescence," he said, sticking out his tongue as she passed. Bleh. She did look very pale, with black lipstick and eyeliner. "You mean Amy Lee?" Tanya corrected him. "Who's that?" Rachel's brother asked. Rachel punched her brother lightly on the arm and explained, "The lead singer of Evanescence." He rubbed his arm. "No one cares," he told his sister defiantly. "Bands were so much better in my day," Mr. Smith said from the stove. He had multiple pans on the go and was just about finished with one. "Who was that one singer? I have like all her albums." "Fleetwood Mac," the boy suggested. "Yeah, that's her," Mr. Smith said. Rachel slammed her head into the counter with frustration, even as Tanya sat down beside her. "What are you reading?" Tanya asked, grabbing a book from Rachel that she'd brought down with her. "It's nothing," Rachel said, grabbing it back quickly. Tanya had managed to read the title, though. "The King James Bible." "Hey!" her dad yelled at her. What did we tell you about religion in this household? I'm allowed to practice whatever I want and encouraged to explore, Rachel said. Good, her dad muttered. At least someone was paying attention. What? Rachel's brother asked, looking up from his game thing. I stopped listening after the word Bible. I've been reading a specific section of the Bible, Rachel told them, called the Book of Ecclesiastes. I came across it while researching about death without an afterlife. Wait, Ian said as Rachel's dad put an Eggo on his plate. Is this about that atheist you saw in your dream? What? Tanya asked. What did she miss? I called it the whatever, Rachel explained. What? Tanya repeated. It doesn't matter, Rachel said. Tanya didn't think she'd ever seen Rachel so serious before. Look, this book talks all about how meaningless everything is in life. He says our wealth gives us nothing that we can't take. I have no idea what that noise was. He says wealth gives us nothing that we can take with us. To live your life. I'm doing a terrible job here. Let me try this again. All right, it doesn't matter, Rachel said. Tanya didn't think she'd ever seen Rachel so serious before. Look, this book talks all about how meaningless life is. He says our wealth gives us nothing that we can take with us. To live your life for love or work is pointless because there is nothing but oblivion waiting for us on the other side. It's like the stresses of life don't really matter at all, and we should appreciate just the little things, the small pleasures. He says there's no real difference between a rich man and a poor one. They both start as dust, and that's how they end. Rachel's brother raised his hand, and Rachel shot him an angry glare. What do you want, Jacob? She asked him. I just want to know, he said, lowering his hand. If you had babies, do you think they'd come out all goth, like with makeup on? He started to laugh at his own joke, but tried to keep going. Like, maybe he'd have, like, a little plastic knife for cutting himself? You better not be cutting yourself, Rachel's dad yelled at her from the stove. What? Rachel asked in shock. No, I'm not cutting myself, she said, as if it were obvious. Don't you think you would notice? She said angrily, flashing her wrists so her family could see they were scar-free. I'm not even goth, God! Good, he said. There will be absolutely no cutting yourselves in this house. He raised a finger. That's a big one. Right up there with religious freedom, Tanya pointed out. That's right, Rachel's father said, oblivious to Tanya's sarcasm. He pulled something from the pan and slammed it on a plate. I have something special for you, Mrs. President. He placed the plate in front of Tanya. My first cheese omelet, he said. Tanya was pretty sure what he'd just given her wasn't an omelet. You sure this isn't an egg and cheese burrito? She asked him. What's the difference? Asked Mr. Smith. In an omelet, you don't need to use a wrap. The egg is the wrap. Mr. Smith threw the pan into the sink. I give up, he told Rachel and Jacob. We need your mother. Oh, come on, Ian said, grabbing bacon off a plate. The bacon is perfect. It's microwavable, Mr. Smith told him. And I made it, Jacob told him. Well, I've lost my appetite, Rachel lied, or told the truth. We should get to school. She set off her stool and grabbed her bag. By the time she had her sneakers on, Tanya was waiting for her with Ian by the door. I wanted to ask you something, Ian started to say. Well, don't, Rachel said quickly to him, throwing him a dark look. It occurred to Tanya that Rachel probably heard everything they were talking about outside. She heard his intentions to ask her out. She must have. So why was she trying to avoid giving an answer? Was it because Tanya still had a chance with her? You hear that? Rachel asked on the front porch as Ian closed the door behind them. Ian shook his head. The rest of us don't have awesome vampire hearing, he told her. It could be anything. But it's so loud, she complained, pulling her toque over her ears before opening her umbrella. Like a buzzing or something, she muttered. Tanya didn't even pay Rachel any attention, her mind spinning now with doubts. After Ian struck out with Rachel, Tanya didn't really feel like following his move with her own. But that meant another day in that stupid, smelly, metaphorical closet, and Tanya really didn't think she could handle another normal day in that school. She wanted to scream, to break old TVs, or maybe shoot some really big guns. I'm gonna skip phys ed, Tanya told her friends. Can you do that? Ian asked. You're the president. I can do whatever the hell I want, 'cause I'm the president, she lied. The president of student council really didn't have as much influence as people seem to think. Could she skip school without getting in trouble, though? Of course. Scene change, scene change, scene change. Last time Hannah had been to City Hall, she'd had to use the front visitors' parking lot, but she was the mayor's personal assistant this time, and she had her own private parking pass for special employee parking around behind the building. To her surprise, the parking lot was just a big shelf with a mechanical arm used to lift cars on and off. There was a guard at a kiosk beside the robotic arm, and he waved for her to drive up. Bees. This is news now, a man on the radio said as the commercial faded into the news on the hour. And we're live, the man said in a peculiar way. The top story this morning. There seems to have been a mass theft of bees throughout much of South America and the Caribbean. Even beekeepers in Texas have been reporting entire hives of bees going MIA sometime during the night. You hear about that? The guard asked her as she turned off the radio. Those bees? Only just now, she admitted to him. My brother just texted me from Washington, the state, said the bees that lived under his porch all up and left. The guard laughed, scratching his scraggly gray beard. Ha 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 ha. They say all the bees are disappearing, like in that movie, The Happening. I don't know if I believe in all that. People are getting all alarmed over nothing, you ask me. Pretty sure I saw one fly past not 2 minutes ago. Color me a non-believer too, then, Hannah told the man as she got out of her car. She slung her purse over her shoulder and balanced 2 coffees with one in each hand. Have a good first day, he called after her, hitting a button to make the mechanical arm come down and lift Hannah's car onto the shelf. It was terrific to watch, but Hannah could only assume they'd put it through rigorous testing before making people use it. She made her way around to the front of the building where the glass doors opened on cue. She ascended the escalator to find she wasn't the first person in the office that morning. The secretary she'd met last night was already at her desk. As soon as the secretary noticed Hannah, she dropped her phone. Have you heard about the bees? She asked. I'm really not interested, Hannah said, putting her coffees down on the secretary's desk, but I brought coffee. Forget that, said the secretary, brushing her off. There's something you need to see. She rolled around from behind her desk, beckoning for Hannah to follow her down the hall. Do you know when the mayor is going to get in? Hannah asked the secretary. I wanted to get situated first before he shows up. The mayor has a delicate and diverse ecosystem living inside the atrium, the secretary told Hannah, ignoring her questions. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Hannah interrupted. I want to be briefed on everything. I need to sync up calendars with you so I can take over his appointments. I'll need his contact lists, dossiers on all the major players. Hannah would have gone on, but it didn't seem like the woman was listening to her. Included within that ecosystem, the chair-bound woman continued, are 5,000 African bumblebees. Wait, what? Hannah asked, completely losing her entire string of thought. 2 colonies worth. Why does the mayor have 2 colonies of African bees? They're extinct, the woman said, swiping her badge to let them into the multiple-story indoor garden. If the bees were extinct, Hannah argued, Dixon wouldn't have 5,000 of them. The garden consisted of a number of trees and grass and even a stream, all with a simple brick path leading into a bridge over a waterfall, all within glass walls, beyond which one could happily watch the goings-ons. Yeah, that should be goings-on. Or who knows what the hell that should be. That is a crazy tense there. Watch the goings-on of Oakville Harbor and downtown Oakville. Considering that there were 5,000 bees in a surprisingly small space, the garden seemed particularly devoid of the critters. There were fish in the stream, and a panda chewing on some bamboo in between a couple trees, but she couldn't spot a single bee. Of course, the mayor owned a panda. So, this weird thing you wanted me to see? Hannah said. Did you mean the whole room? No, the secretary said, rolling up the bridge. Hannah stepped in to help her, but she slid easily down the other side. You need to see the far wall, she told Hannah. The path led them around a tree, where Hannah saw a part of the wall that wasn't made out of glass. It was kind of black and pulsating? Moving? Oh God. It's the bees, the secretary said. She was right. It was bees, many of them, crawling over themselves trying to get out. It's all the bees. Hannah had never really seen anything like it. Is that normal bee behavior? She asked. The secretary shrugged. I don't know bees, she said. Should I call a bee specialist? Hannah wasn't quite sure why the secretary was asking her. When the mayor isn't here, am I in charge? Hannah asked. No, said a rough-voiced man leaning against a tree beside them. Had he been there the whole time? It was the man who had been at her interview with the mayor. He was still smoking an e-cigarette, though this one glowed orange. Should I call a specialist? The secretary asked the smoking man. I'm sure they're all quite busy at the moment, the man said as if his answer was obvious. I never caught your name, Hannah told the man. William Spender, the man said, smoke bellowing from between his lips with each word. Do you know when the mayor will be in, Mrs. Spender? I mean, Mr. Spender? How insulting, Hannah asked. Not that insulting, I apologize. Part of her was desperate for more time to situate herself, but she didn't much want his coffee to get cold. He's not coming in today, Spender told them. You're both going to need to run damage control. He seemed to think to himself for a moment. In fact, cancel his appointments for the next week. The next week? Hannah said. He's the mayor. He can't just stop coming to work. Really? Asked Spender as he turned to leave. Or is he exclusively able to blow off work because he is the mayor? Hannah was pretty certain that wasn't how it worked, but she didn't get a chance to say any more before he was gone. Who was that guy? She asked the secretary. Some people reckon, the woman replied, for everyone working with the mayor, only 2 men know the full agenda. Let me guess, Dixon and Spender? Hannah asked, trying to imagine the two being up to no good. It wasn't hard, but she'd always had a dislike for smokers, even modern ones. What do you reckon? I'm stuck in a damn wheelchair and don't give a shit, the secretary said. Fair enough, warranted Hannah. She was starting to wonder if the chair-bound woman might be her only ally. I'm Hannah Lynn, by the way. The woman frowned, but accepted Hannah's hand. Melissa Stewart, she said. Melissa, Hannah repeated. Have you ever known the mayor to not show up for work? Only all the time, Melissa said with a warning look to Hannah. His previous assistant asked all the same questions too before she got sacked. Did she ever talk to you about it? Hannah asked. Melissa laughed. The bigger question, she asked, is did the woman ever shut up? At Hannah's look, she added, No, she never did. I heard it all. Apparently he spends all his free time in his lab. What does he do there? Asked Hannah. You'd have to ask her, Melissa said. Hannah's foot tapped distractedly against the ground while her head spun with thought. Do you know her name? Hannah asked the chair-bound Melissa. Karen something, Melissa told her. I have the lady's contact information at my desk. Melissa turned her chair around and began pushing herself over the bridge while Hannah gave the bees one more concerned look. She couldn't help but notice that the direction they were all pushing to They were all pushing to fly towards just happened to be her neighborhood, where everyone she loved were all going about their day. Must have been a coincidence. Scene change, scene change, scene change, and I will be right back. Right back in just be a moment. These sirens are on my end. I'm back. Oh, I'm sitting on the table. Alright, I'm back. Sorry, I was just putting food in the oven because I am hungry. And I only have 2 hours before I have to go to work. Alright, let's do this. So we scene changed. Let me water break too. Water break. Seriously? Mike Jones said to Andrew. A knife? Yeah, man, Andrew said, showing off his battle scars. The guy just threw it at me. Rachel and Ian had met Andrew just outside his house. His arm was in a sling, he had a nasty black eye, and he was still grounded. He could only come out of his room for school and World of Warcraft. Rachel had been mostly silent during their walk to school. Jason didn't meet them at his usual spot, but it wasn't abnormal for him to make his own way back to school. They then met Mike Jones and the red-haired Alice talking outside the school doors. It figures you would be the one of us to get stabbed by a gang member, Alice said. Rachel noticed in Andrew's face that she wasn't the only one surprised by Alice joining herself to the group, but she supposed Alice had to go somewhere when Tanya wasn't around. So how did you get away? Alice asked, reaching out to touch Andrew's scar before he covered it again with his sling. Mike crossed his arms. Let me guess, he said, saved by a vampire. Ha ha, Alice said sarcastically. Rachel kicked Mike hard, and Mike gave Andrew a puzzled look. She doesn't know? He asked. Andrew seemed to be searching Mike's face for clues. Why? He asked. Do you know? You didn't know? Mike asked with surprise. They didn't let you know that I know? Andrew laughed. Welcome to the club, dude! They high-fived. Rachel seemed the only one who didn't think her whole vampire secret was rad, or whatever. Well, maybe Ian. What are they talking about? Alice asked Rachel. Rachel shrugged. Some guy thing. She told the redhead. I was lobbying for you to know from the start, Andrew told Mike. I wanted to tell you myself. I appreciate that, Mike said. They shared a man hug. Rachel thought it was pretty lame. Guys are lame, Alice said, and Rachel's respect for her jumped a couple more pegs. The ginger smiled at her, and Rachel was struck by the contrast between her pale skin and her vibrant blue eyes. She could almost imagine a world where she was dating another girl. Of course, she knew what Ian had been wanting to ask that morning. She didn't want to answer because she had honestly had no idea what to say. Did she have feelings for him? Perhaps more than any other person in the world. But did she want to date him? How could she say yes to that? Would she try to think of them having sex? It was weird. Whenever she tried to think of having sex with another girl, however, well, yeah, that was kind of weird too. Sex just complicated things, and she really didn't have any interest in any of it. But how could she say no to Ian? It would crush him. He'd hate her because of it. His love for her was going to destroy their friendship. It was as if he could sense her discomfort, and Ian did what felt natural to him. He grabbed Rachel's hand and she let him. She didn't mind that. Holding hands wasn't so bad for now. Aha, friends! Bilal yelled, getting out of his mom's car. Where's Jason? Yeah, said Mike. It's not like Jason to skip gym. Mike grabbed Andrew's good arm and stopped the group suddenly. You think he got taken? By, like, vampires? Should we go and investigate? Alice sighed and took their first step into the school. What is it with you and vampires? She asked as the rest of them followed her into the front hall. Aha, can't believe I'm saying this, said Bilal. But I'm with Alice. Rachel wasn't the only one to shoot the Muslim a surprised look. At least give him till the second bell, he suggested to them. Rachel was glad once the doors closed and slightly muffled the incessant buzzing she couldn't get out of her head. It was so loud. She didn't understand how no one else could hear it. She had already tried tuning it out, but it was way more intense than anything she was used to. It was hard to even think. Being inside the building made it a little better, but for how long? It was getting louder with every passing moment. You okay? Ian asked. Rachel nodded. Let's just get changed. They sped up to their respective change rooms, Alice following in behind Rachel, who was glad she wasn't going into the change room alone for once. Ow! The bitchy, destructive voice of all-around horrible person, Dacia said to both of them. You're both so damn pale, you're blinding me. She raised her hands to shield her eyes from the imaginary beams of light bouncing off Rachel's glittering skin. My skin doesn't sparkle, Rachel muttered with a roll of her eyes. Ignore her, Alice told Rachel. She's simply jealous of our rising popularity. They chose 2 lockers together, and Alice pulled off her jean skirt to replace with their mandatory gym shorts. Where's Tanya? Dacia asked. Rachel was surprised she'd already noticed the president's absence. Word traveled fast. But Dacia wasn't done. Did she break up with you? The evil pizza-faced bitch said. Did Dacia know about the kiss she shared with Tanya in the bathroom? Rachel searched Dacia's face for answers, but other than an annoying grin, the bully's expression was blank. She slithered from the room, leaving Rachel and Alice to a moment's peace. I don't know why Tanya ever liked her, Alice said, staring the door down. When was that? Rachel said, half-joking. Last summer, Alice said, pulling the uniform white t-shirt over her head. I heard she had a lot of sleepovers that summer, but I was never invited to any. She frowned. I've never even seen her house. But Dacia has? Rachel asked. Alice changed topics. Do you think the period defense would work 2 weeks in a row? She asked as she stepped through the doors to the gym. It would if Mr. Carnally was missing it. It would if Mr. Carnally were missing and replaced with some creepy old guy, Jason said, waiting outside the door for Rachel. I thought Mr. Carnally was some creepy old guy, Alice admitted. Where have you been, Jason? Rachel asked. He wasn't in his gym clothes. Mike and Bilal spotted Jason and jogged the length of the gym to join them. I've been looking for Mr. Carnally, Jason told her. Ah, did you hear? Bilal said within range. We have a substitute. I know, Jason told him. I run every morning before school with Mr. Carnally, only he didn't show up this morning. You run with Carnally? Mike asked. Alice shook her head. That's so creepy, she said. But also makes a lot of sense, Mike admitted. Rachel silently agreed with him. It happens naturally. I was doing my normal run one morning, Jason explained, and we bumped into each other. When we realized we both did 10 clicks every morning, we decided to start doing them together. 10 kilometers? Mike asked in disbelief. Ah, nah, Bilal corrected. He said 10 clicks. Yeah, anyway, Jason said. After he didn't show up at the usual time this morning, I went to his house and found out from his wife that he'd never made it home after basketball practice on Saturday. Who would marry Carnally? Asked Mike. You have no idea how hard it is to get dressed with a sling, Andrew said to the group as he joined them at the inn. Oh, boo-hoo, Alice said. Try putting on a straitjacket with a broken arm. At everyone's look, she explained. I was in an old girl's rendition of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Who are you? Andrew asked. Jack Nicholson? I was the one that didn't talk, Alice told him, and spent all my time in the back acting crazy during a pivotal scene. Ah, so you were like a pivotal extra, Bilal reasoned. Yeah, Alice said. That doesn't sound so emotionally scarring. Ian sidled up beside Rachel. We have a substitute. I heard we have a substitute, he said to the group. I saw him, Jason told them, in Carnally's office. Xbox, stop listening. Thank you. Rachel instinctively took a strong whiff of the air around her, taking the scents of her friends and others. The vile scent of Dacia, standing with her friends Alex and Scott by the bleachers, and a strong smell of Carnally, but not really him, his blood. Rachel reached out for Ian's hand and clenched it nervously. She could smell Carnally's office, but there was no one there. Are you sure? Rachel asked. In his office? She could smell no one there, nor were there any unfamiliar smells in the hallway. She tried to listen into the office, and thought she might have heard the closing of a door, but it was hard to hear anything over the loud buzzing. She had no problem, however, hearing a familiar voice say her name as the last person she had ever expected to meet at school came happily stepping through the door. Rachel, the familiar voice said. Lin, it continued. Smith. It finished with a perverse restraint. Rachel didn't want to turn around. If she turned around, it would make him real, and she wasn't ready to deal with that quite yet. How could he have found her? How could he be there now when he was all the way in Toronto? "When I call your name," the voice said after a moment of unnerving silence, "please respond with here or present. Rachel Lin SMith." She turned, and sure enough, it was Eckhart standing at the door, clipboard in hand, and he knew who she was. His gray eyes were boring down upon her. He chuckled, soaking in every second that Rachel was silent, unable to speak from the shock. It was like her fear strengthened him. Daisha yelled from across the gym, "He's talking to you, retard Lin SMith." Eckhart slowly walked the many steps from the entrance to where they were standing. "Are you Rachel Lin SMith?" the deranged vampire read from his clipboard. "Or are you a retard?" He pointed to Daisha across the gym. She smirked at Rachel victoriously. "Present," Rachel said quietly, her eyes frozen on Eckhart's. Alice stepped in front of her suddenly. "Actually, I'm Rachel," she said to Eckhart. "She's Alice." If there was ever a moment that Rachel started thinking of Alice as her friend, it was then. But Alice paid a bitter price for her practical joke. "Stay silent, girl," Eckhart told the red-headed teen, staring deep into her eyes. Just like that, her mouth shut, and she stepped quietly away from the man, hiding behind Rachel. He looked at the attendants and called out another name. "Tanya Dayton," he said loudly. There was no answer. "Absent," he said, jabbing jabbing the pen gleefully into the paper. What was he doing there? What could possibly have been his plan? He reeked of Mr. Carnally. Was he wearing the man's clothes? Rachel realized she was holding Ian's hand too tightly, and let go abruptly. Did he sense her panic? Could she just blow the whole thing and warn her friends? Did Eckhart know that she'd already told her friends about vampires? What would he do if he found out? "Where's Mr. Carnally?" Jason asked angrily. "Where's Mr. Carnally?" Jason. That sounds too old. "Where's Mr. Carnally?" Jason asked angrily. He'd been impatiently suspicious of the substitute, and Rachel could kiss him for that. "Who?" Eckhart asked with disinterest. It was Mike who answered first. "He was our gym teacher, you twat." "Ah, yes," Eckhart said. "Him." The vampire grinned behind his clipboard. "He's all torn up," he said, "over his divorce with his wife." Rachel knew Eckhart was lying. Still, Eckhart continued, "No one really recovers after the loss of their first love." He's well into his third marriage," Jason corrected Eckhart defiantly. The vampire frowned at him, and Rachel pulled him behind her and Alice. But Eckhart merely smiled. "Even the third love," he said, looking at Rachel, "even the 100th. I believe every love in your life takes a piece of your soul with it when it goes." Rachel thought it vomit-inducing that Eckhart seemed to figure he had a soul. "That's sort of pretty," Daisha said quietly, as if she knew the meaning of the word. Of course she'd like Eckhart. Part of Rachel hoped he would turn her, and they could run off and be happy together. But she knew better than to expect things to go her way, even once. Eckhart smiled. "Call me Mr. Gaines," he told the unattractive bully with that annoying chuckle of his. "Aha, Gain?" Bilal asked, trying to pronounce his name. "Like the laundry detergent?" Daisha ignored Bilal. "Are you a poet, Mr. Gaines?" she asked. Eckhart chuckled again at hearing her say his name. "Because I could not stop for death," he quoted. "He kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality." It seemed everyone in the gym had their attention solely on Eckhart. He seemed to be enjoying the attention and flashed Daisha a sharp smile. "Emily Dickinson," he told her. The air was so thick with tension that one could almost slice it like bread. It came as a surprise then when the PA system activated quite suddenly and warned people to stand for the playing of O Canada. The song played out, but no one moved. Rachel wasn't even sure what would happen if she did. It was an irrational fear, but she felt like if she twitched even the slightest muscle in her toe, Eckhart might just go crazy and kill everyone. Sure, there were rules over what he could do in public. He made it quite clear that as vampires they were forced to keep a low profile. Shut up, phone, shut up. Something about a low profile. But from her experience, Eckhart was out of his mind. How long would it be, really, before he decided to just screw the consequences and really explode? Could he even be stopped before killing all 1,000 people in the school? Rachel felt like she was standing in front of a large nuclear bomb, only instead of a timer, it just had a flashing bulb warning her that it could explode at any conceivable second. Every second he didn't explode just made the next second seem even more likely to be her last one. "There will be no more announcements," Vice Principal Hurley said through the PA, "besides this one, of course." There was a moment, as perhaps Hurley realized she had the chance to say whatever she wanted. She could be heard shifting at her desk. "Now remember, school. Skipping school is bad because it means you can't learn, and if you don't learn, you'll die alone and homeless on the street." There was a noise, likely the principal stepping in, and the announcements ended quite abruptly. "That was deliciously harsh," Eckhart said, looking once more to the attendants before him. "You know, this is taking far longer than I'd expected." He told the group, filling a couple random spots around the middle of the forum, "Shall we move on?" "Hey!" the bully Danny yelled from the back of the class. "One of those could have been my name. One more black mark on my record and I'll be expelled." Eckhart smiled at the boy, and Rachel quickly supposed there wasn't one but two people in their class who wouldn't mind him killing. Did Daisha and Danny both deserve to die, though? And why did both their names start with a D? "And what was your name?" Eckhart asked. "McGreed," Danny said. Eckhart found it on the list and maliciously dropped the pencil onto the attendants one more time. "Got you now," he said with a sneer. Daisha laughed too, but everyone else was silent. "Screw this, then," Danny said, swearing and throwing his arms in the air. "I'm gone and you can go straight to hell." Was Danny seriously trying to get himself killed? Despite what she'd just thought to herself, Rachel could feel her muscles tightening. She was ready to pounce, even to Danny's rescue, if Eckhart tried anything. If Danny had angered Eckhart in any way, he hadn't showed it. He was still smiling, in fact. "What are those things in your ears?" he asked the bully. He was referring, of course, to Danny's ear spacers that made his earlobes beyond massive. "You look completely ridiculous." Danny gave Eckhart the middle finger as he stepped out from the gym, but the vampire was silent and just bit his thumb in retort. "Is school always this eventful here?" he asked the rest of the students once the door shut. Rachel didn't know what was worse, that Eckhart was at her school impersonating a teacher, or that he seemed to be enjoying himself so much. She didn't want to laugh with him. She didn't want him in her life. Was he laughing? I could have chuckled. "You're not the teacher," Rachel said quietly, immediately feeling stupid after she did. That was totally why she didn't like talking. Eckhart chuckled. And Rachel quickly remembered how much he hated when Eckhart chuckled. "The principal would," he chuckled again. "Disagree with you there." Did he brainwash the principal? Why? Rachel asked. Why did he go so far to hunt her? "What do you want with me?" "God, Rachel," Daisha said, butting in on the conversation. "Stop being such a diva. The world doesn't revolve around you." That was it. Rachel snapped. I will... How am I going to say this in Rachel's voice? That was it. Rachel snapped. "I will rip out your tongue and shove it up your ass," she told Daisha, grabbing the girl's tongue to really drive home her point. Whoosh! Dacia squirmed, but Rachel held tight. Her defenses had been high, her aggression even more so, but it had been a misfire. She let go, and Dacia shrunk away as she turned back to Eckhart, who had watched the whole thing with amusement. "You're my greatest creation," he told her quiet enough so that only she would hear him. "You didn't create me," she told him. "I think it's time we stopped playing pretend," he said to her. "I came here to blow your cover so you can take your rightful place by my side." Rachel's stomach lurched. He'd come to destroy everything, though she supposed it was a step up from trying to kill her. She was happy when someone else spoke and released her from the burden of generating a response. She couldn't have done it. She had nothing to say that wasn't "No." "So what are you going to make us do today?" Gordon asked. "Well, it says here that you were learning fitness in the weight room." Eckhart pulled a key from around his neck. "I've got the key," he said. "Show me the way." He chuckled from his own corny joke. As Gordon and Dacia led him to the weight room, Rachel held tight to Ian's hand. "What's wrong with you?" he asked Rachel. Rachel shot him a look. "Code black," she told him. Ian signaled Andrew and Bilal to hang back. Mike was most of the way across the gym when he noticed and jogged back. What is it?" Ian asked. "Can't talk here," Rachel hissed at them. Eckhart could hear every word they said, and if he started to clue in on exactly which students were her co-conspirators, who knows what he'd do. She didn't want to make her friends targets, but how could she warn them without him knowing? Alright, we're on page 421. How many pages are left here? 441, so there's 20 pages left. Yeah, I think I'm going to call it there. That sounds like about halfway through the chapter. Alright, so it has been an hour and 16 minutes, and we have read half this chapter. Eckhart is crazy. Rachel hopefully will come up with a plan to stop him because he has invaded her school. What's going to happen next? We are nearing the end of the book, but there are still 3 more chapters after this one. And this one isn't over yet. It's still got half a chapter left. Holy camole, that's a lot of writing. Alright, so hope you guys enjoyed this chapter. If you don't want to wait to read more, you can always become a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/99geek, and then you can read for yourself and read all you want. You wouldn't have to wait for me to come back. I'll probably read the rest before the weekend. I'm not quite sure when, but we shall see. Until then, enjoy. This has been 99geek.ca, and we are the 99% geek. Peace out. Oh yeah,